Hi, welcome back to Busch History. I'm David Busch, and this is the 10th topic in my ongoing series on American history. I'm experimenting with lighting, and we'll see how this goes. Once again, more emails this week. I think it's probably growing in popularity, which is kind of nice. I hope this is useful to whoever is watching it. And a little idea what's going on here. So now, what's happened in American history is we have a dual society. We have a North that's highly industrialized, a South that's highly agricultural, a fairly strong government structure in the United States. The South is really championing state rights, and the North is really championing a strong federal system, and the two are at odds. While all this is going on, one of the few things that's keeping the nation together is this idea of westward expansion. It's a goal. It's a goal. How much of this land are we going to conquer? Are we going to conquer all of it? Are we going to manifest our destiny, as John L. O'Sullivan predicted in 1845? So this segment, or topic if you like, is going to take a look at how the United States actually expanded. And it's going to be done in a three-presentation event, if you like. So just take a quick look. Once again, Busch History Topic 10, the territorial expansion of the United States. There's going to be three videos. There's going to be a discussion video, a PowerPoint video, and a quiz this time. A little different. And we're going to make it three videos, put an S on that. And the quiz is a collection of College Board questions on this topic of westward expansion. So I want to show you a map now of exactly how the United States was put together. Let's take a look at the various pieces of the United States as we became assembled. Kind of like a puzzle. I'm going to step out of this and use a pointer because it's easier to see the entire map without me in the way. Let's take a look. So the original United States is along the eastern coast. So the original 13 colonies are here. Then what's going to happen is we're going to win our independence in the Revolutionary War, and when we win our independence, we're going to get this piece, the Ohio Valley. Remember, one of the things that caused the American Revolution was the proclamation of 1763, which prevented colonists from going to the Ohio Valley. So, original 13 colonies becoming states. This is added in 1783. I'm sorry, with the treaty at the end of the Revolutionary War. In 1803, we're going to get the Louisiana Purchase, which is right here, in which the administration of Thomas Jefferson was able to purchase that huge piece of land from Napoleon. In 1819, we're going to get Florida from Spain. Spain was unable to defend it from the Jackson incursions. Then we're going to move along. We're going to get a small piece called the Spanish Cession as part of the deal for Florida in 1819. In 1845, this will be the Republic of Texas, which will be annexed by the United States. Texas originally belonged to Mexico, fought for its independence, and then in the mid-1830s, it asked to be a state as part of the United States, and it was delayed for a while until James K. Polk became president, and in 1845, it is annexed by the United States, becomes part of the United States, which is going to lead to the Mexican-American War, which we're simply going to call the Mexican War. And here's Mexico, to give you an idea. It's going to be over border dispute, which I'll explain in a couple of minutes. As a result of the Mexican War, which we're going to defeat Mexico, we're going to get all of this, called the Mexican Cession. A huge piece of land, no doubt, and certainly we'll get the gold in California as a result of that. Then also in 1846, we're going to negotiate a treaty with the British to get the Oregon Territory. So as you see, it's not state by state. Sure, the states are superimposed on this map and you can see the outlines of them, but we didn't go one state, another state, another state, another state, another state, another state. We added piece by piece. We're going to get Alaska in 1867, which I love these maps that has Alaska down by Mexico. Alaska is really way up here. And Hawaii, we're going to get in 1898. So we actually get a bunch of pieces along the way, and it's not really a state-by-state progression out west. There's a series of events, and acquisition. So they're territories. And when the people in a given territory reach 50,000 voters, they can choose to write a constitution and apply to become part of the United States, which is what I'm going to explain as we go through this. Let's take a look at what we have here. We have the territorial expansion of the United States, 1820 to 1860. Remember, you can find all the accompanying information and materials for these YouTube videos on Buschistory.net. They're going to be on a folder called Topic 10. And again, the website is updated on a weekly basis when I add the YouTube videos. So if you go on Buschistory.net/YouTube, you get all the YouTube materials. There's a link on it. Don't worry about it. You can find it. And I'm going to continue to update these videos once a week, as best as I possibly can, marching through the American history curriculum. So nevertheless, let's take more of a look at it here. In 1820, enough settlers are in Missouri that they want to become a state. Well, the problem is Missouri is in the middle of the United States. It bumps up a little bit from the southern part and bumps down from the northern part. It's right smack dab in the middle. I'll show you a map of that in a minute. And what do you do with this? The people in Missouri, through something called popular sovereignty was simply they chose that they wanted to be a slave state. And the problem here is if we added a slave state, we would upset the balance in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it was important to keep that balance. So strangely enough, through a collection of land from southern Canada and northern United States, Maine also wanted to enter at pretty much the same time. So Henry Clay comes up with an idea. He says, why not take both? We'll take Maine, we'll take Missouri, Maine will be free, Missouri will be slave, and the whole thing is good to go. So, as a result, what happens is we get the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Crisis is settled with the Missouri Compromise, so the Missouri Crisis leads to the Missouri Compromise, which occurs in 1820. And the way it's going to work out is Maine will be a free state, Missouri is a slave state. Now here's going to be the linchpin that's going to cause a problem later on. There'll be no slavery north of Missouri's southern border. And that compromise is going to hold. It's going to hold all the way up until 1850, more precisely 1849, 1850, when the California Gold Rush occurs, and all of a sudden California wants to be a state. But we'll deal with that in a few minutes. The next area of concern is going to be Texas. I'll take a longer look at Texas in a couple of minutes, just to walk through it very quickly right now. Texas is annexed in 1845 after being its own republic, and Texas is very far south. So when Texas is annexed, we have a whole question of slavery rearing its ugly head again. Separate topic for a second. That causes something called the Mexican War over a border dispute between where is the border between Texas and Mexico. As a result of winning that war in 1848, we're going to get the Mexican Cession, which you saw a couple of minutes ago, where we get this huge part of the United States, the entire southwest part of the United States, and California, which of course is going to mean the gold. So now, that's going to cause the gold rush to occur in 1849, hence the 49ers. The Mexicans are probably pretty upset about that one. Well, California's population explodes, and California wants to be a state. And most of the people moving into California didn't bring slaves with them. It took too long. You got to go across the desert. They went there to get rich. So California's population explodes, and California wants to be a state. The problem is, California runs both north and south of the Missouri Compromise line. So will it be a free state or a slave state? Real briefly, there was a debate. So let's divide California. Let's have North and South California like we have North and South Carolina. That wouldn't work because the North would get the gold, because that's where the gold deposits were, and the South wouldn't. So that wasn't going to work. Well, that's going to lead to something called the Compromise of 1850. And the Compromise of 1850, real briefly, says that California enters as a free state, and in return, slave owners down south will get the right to capture their slaves any place to run away to in the country. And that's going to be called the Fugitive Slave Act of 1851. That Fugitive Slave Act is going to be incredibly controversial, because now essentially slavery can extend into any part of the United States. You can't own slaves in the northern part of the country, but what you have to do is you have to return them into slavery. And just think about what a bad deal and how ugly that's going to be. Because now when a slave wants to run away, he's got to run all the way to Canada. Whereas prior to that, he could have run to New York, he could have run to Ohio, he could have run to Massachusetts, any of the northern states. The next of the three compromises on slavery is going to be called the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and that's going to be in 1854. But let's back up a little bit, because things cause other things to occur. We left off with the Compromise of 1850, which led to the Fugitive Slave Act, which led to all kinds of problems on slavery. But the issue's not over yet. A guy by the name of Stephen Douglas, he wants to be President of the United States. He's a popular politician, and he wants to show that he can be president. So he comes up, he hatches an idea. He says, why don't we build a railroad across the entire United States? And we're going to build that railroad through the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. Well, good idea, but the railroad has to serve people. It has to have a reason for going there. So he comes up with the idea that Kansas and Nebraska should become states. Well, now if Kansas and Nebraska are going to become states, will they be free states or will they be slave states? Well, Stephen Douglas comes up with an idea called popular sovereignty. And it's not really a new idea, but here it's going to be terribly controversial. Popular sovereignty is just what it sounds like. The people, popular, sovereignty, freedom. The people are going to be free to vote on whether their state will be free or slave. The problem with this is that the people can only vote once they're a state. They need to have 50,000 people. Once they decide they want to be a state, they need to have 50,000 voters. What happens when they have 30,000 voters? What happens when they have 40,000 voters? You potentially have a little civil war occurring as the free people and the slave people are going to disagree about this and try to hedge their bets. So what's going to happen here is Stephen Douglas wants to be president, so he said, let's build a railroad in Kansas. And he suggests popular sovereignty in the Kansas and Nebraska territories. Great idea, great idea. Let the people decide. Horrible idea. Because when are they going to decide? They're not going to decide before people move in. They're going to decide after people move in. And that means that people are going to be warring with each other. It's going to be a little mini civil war in Kansas and Nebraska, mostly Kansas. Anyway, so that's going to be called the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. And just for the moment, Stephen Douglas is going to look like a genius. But what happens next? Well, the Republican Party is going to be formed. The Republican Party is going to be formed with the idea of getting rid of slavery. While the Republican Party is gaining political strength, a group in New England called New England Emigrant Aid Society, that's with an E, is going to say, I tell you what, let's send people from New England, from Massachusetts, to Kansas, and we're going to call them free soilers. Now, of course, who they're sending are all of the poor and unemployed Irish, so they're getting them the hell out of New England, getting them out of Massachusetts, and they're going to send them to Kansas. And when they send them to Kansas, they're going to bring their northern values. Well, Kansas borders Missouri, and Missouri is going to send their pro-slave people. So you're going to have free soilers against the pro-slave faction, which is going to be called border ruffians, and they're going to battle with each other. And that battling is going to be called Bleeding Kansas. And that Bleeding Kansas is going to be incredibly ugly in the middle of the 1850s. The 1850s is called the Decade of Crisis, and this is largely why. So what I'm going to take a look at now are some of the larger details of these basic ideas. A few minutes ago, I was talking about Texas, and I said I would add information. I want to add that right now, because Texas is a real interesting case in the United States history. Only Texas and Hawaii were independent countries before they became states. Texas asked for annexation, and Hawaii was effectively stolen. But we will get to that when we get into the 1890s. Let's just talk about Texas for a second. So if you take a look at the case. Mexico connects to Texas, connects to James K. Polk. Initially, Americans went into Texas. They were invited by the Mexican government, and they were told they could bring their slaves and they could practice any religion they wanted to. Texas being pretty far south, a lot of the people in the southeastern part of the United States were certainly not Catholic, as Spanish are. They were variations of Christians called Protestants, but all different kinds, Baptist, Methodist, and the like. But that didn't matter to the Republic of Mexico. Come on in, settle the land. What it really meant was they were settling the northern part of Mexico, and were kind of a human shield against the Great Plains Indians like the Apaches and the Comanches. So people went into Texas. They went into Texas, they brought their slaves, they practiced whatever religion they want, and it worked out fine. Until there were too many in northern Mexico. And they were starting to change Mexico and adopt too many values of the typical Americans. So the Mexican government said, we can't do that. And now you have to practice Catholicism, as most Spanish nations were, as a result of everything that happened prior to this time period in Central America, when the Europeans came and said, you're going to be Catholic or die. But anyway, getting back to the point. So, now the Mexican government was telling the people in Texas, the Americans in Texas, that you can't bring any more slaves, and you have to be Catholic. And that's going to lead to Texas becoming independent from Mexico and the war for Texas, or Texan independence. And that's all part of the whole Alamo and all that other stuff, which we're not going to go into right now, because that's not really part of American history, and some people will dispute that with me. So Texas becomes independent. Take a look what we have here. After the Texas Revolution for independence from Mexico, the independent Republic of Texas was born on May 14, 1836. Now the people in Texas wanted to be part of the United States for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, they were all Americans. Second of all, they wanted any protection the United States government could provide for them, and they wanted to rejoin their nation. Well, in 1836, we have Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson says, nah, I'm not going to do it right now. I'm not going to annex Texas. It's a big problem. Jackson leaves. Martin Van Buren comes along. Martin Van Buren wants to, but nah, he's not really that strong. There's a lot of conflict, so I'm not going to annex Texas. Well, William Henry Harrison comes along with the idea, maybe I'll annex Texas. He dies. And then who comes along after William Henry Harrison? John Tyler. John Tyler says, nah, I'm not going to deal with Texas. And it isn't until James K. Polk comes along, and they call James K. Polk Little Jackson. And he says, of course we're going to annex Texas. It belongs. It's part of the United States. So what happens is, Texas asked to join the U.S. as a new state starting in 1836. A succession of presidents refused to deal with until James K. Polk came along. Polk annexed Texas in December of 1845. Right around the same time, you have John L. Sullivan screaming, manifest destiny. So now it's going to manifest our destiny. We're going to take over the continent because God said so. And once God says so, of course, everything's okay in the United States. Anyway, Polk annexed Texas in December of 1845, and immediately a border dispute was touched off between the U.S. and Mexico. And the border dispute was over this area, the Nueces River or the Rio Grande River, which would be the border between Texas and Mexico. Also, imagine this, if you would. This land between the Rio Grande River and the Nueces River, incredibly fertile land. There was seasonal flooding. It was great growing territory. So, of course, the Mexican government wanted it. And, of course, the United States government wanted it. People in Texas wanted it. So now we have a standoff here. What's going to happen? Well, both Mexico and the United States are going to send troops into this disputed area while negotiations are going on. Tempers flare and the war breaks out. A lot of people think James K. Polk instigated this war. So, Polk annexed Texas again in December of 1845. Was the border the Nueces River, as Mexico stated, or was it the Rio Grande River, as the United States and as Texas and the United States stated? Well, the Mexican War lasted from 1846 to 1848. In the end, Mexico is going to lose everything here. They're going to lose the entire southwest part of the United States, and of course, all the gold, which no one knows about yet, in California. So, in the end, Mexico lost the entire southwest portion of the United States, known as the Mexican Cession. And the treaty that does this is called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. I don't pronounce it well, never did. Most people use my pronunciation, but that's really what we're talking about. So we get the entire southwest portion of the United States, which is a pretty neat deal. So where are we now? We've gotten the Mexican Cession. We've gotten Louisiana. Let's do this in order. First we get the Ohio Valley as a result of the Revolutionary War. Then we get Louisiana in 1803 for $15 million. Then we get Florida as part of the Spanish Cession here and here for $10 million. Then, as a result of the annexation of Texas in 1845 and the Mexican-American War, which a lot of people simply call the Mexican War, we're going to get not just Texas and we're going to get our border at the Rio Grande River. We're going to get Texas and the entire Mexican Cession, which is going to lead to us getting California. When gold is discovered in the fall of 1848 in Northern California up by Sacramento, it's going to cause a flood of people to come into California. California is going to apply for statehood as a free state. It crosses the Missouri Compromise line, because here's the Missouri Compromise. Nothing north of this line should be slave. Missouri will be the only slave state. So Missouri right here is going to stick up. Let's make it right there. Missouri right there is going to stick up as the only slave state. Missouri right there is going to stick up as a slave state north of Arkansas and Tennessee, but on both sides are going to be free states, or open territory, I should say, free states to the east and open territory to the west. And now California wants to be a state. And if you just follow the latitude across, it doesn't work, because it's both north and south of Missouri. What shall it be? And strangely enough, the gold is discovered up here, up by Sacramento. And there's a debate. Here's a good idea. Let's divide California. Let's do this. Right at roughly the Missouri Compromise line. If we divide California and have North California and South California, like we have North Carolina and South Carolina, all the gold is going to be in the northern part of the country. Of course, the northerners like that, and southerners say, no, that's not happening. So they need another compromise. And that is going to lead to the Compromise of 1850, in which California becomes a free state, and we're going to get the Fugitive Slave Law in 1851, in which you can capture your state and run it anywhere in the country. That slave can run anywhere in the country, and you can capture that slave. So slavery has essentially been extended into the northern part of the United States. Touches off the writing of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and now we have lit that fuse on the road to the Civil War, because we're going to get that entire 9-year period of arguments about this. And once we've gotten to the Pacific Ocean, what unified us is now going to tear us apart, because we have achieved our manifest destiny. A little further now, connected to it, in 1846, backing up 2 years, we're going to get the Oregon Territory, as I stated, and then in 1854, we're going to have this guy right here, Kansas, because of Stephen Douglas wanting to become president of the United States, is going to get the idea of popular sovereignty, because we want to build a railroad through it, and that's going to touch off bleeding Kansas. So now, I want to take a look at a PowerPoint and go through this step by step with you. I'm going to leave this here, and I'll be back in a few minutes.